Some jobs are dangerous, some are terrifying, and some take lives in ways no one could ever prepare for. Tonight, you'll hear 3 true stories. A firefighter swallowed by a collapsing silo, a lighthouse keeper consumed by molten fire, and divers torn apart by the very pressure meant to keep them alive. These aren't myths, they aren't ghost stories. They are real accounts of men who died on the job, in ways so horrifying you'll never forget them. I was on shift the night it happened. You could say it was routine, but firefighting never really feels routine. Every call carries risk. Every alarm rings different. It started just before midnight. The call came in from a farmer on the edge of town. He said one of his storage buildings was smoking. His voice was panicked, broken. He didn't just say fire. He said, "It's alive. It's rumbling under me." We loaded up, 4 of us on engine 7, lights cutting through the cold dark. The road out there was empty farmland, dirt and gravel stretching for miles. I remember staring out the window, the night heavy and still, the red reflection bouncing off silos in the distance. When we pulled up, it didn't look like much. Just a squat concrete building, tin siding warped from years of use. A pile of grain dust spilled out the open doorway. At first glance, I thought maybe an electrical short had caught some dust smoldering. Happens sometimes. Not unusual, but then the ground moved. I swear to God, the earth itself shifted. It was subtle, like a vibration under our boots, almost like standing next to a freight train passing underground. We looked at each other. Nobody said anything, but we all felt it. The farmer was outside waving his arms. Middle-aged man, sunburned skin, flannel shirt damp with sweat despite the chill. He kept shouting, "It's gonna collapse! It's gonna take me with it!" We told him to calm down, back away, let us check it out. Inside, the building was hotter than I expected. Too hot for the amount of visible fire. There was barely any flame, just smoke curling upward from the grain pile. But the heat was oppressive, rolling off in waves, and the sound. A low, steady hum, like a generator buried deep underfoot. Every few seconds it pulsed and the walls shuddered. One of us, Daniels, tapped the concrete wall with his axe handle. A hollow echo came back. He frowned. "Feels like it's empty underneath." Empty. That word stuck in my throat. Silos are dangerous enough when full. Grain is like quicksand. Fall in and it'll swallow you alive before you can scream. But if there was a void forming below, if the grain had shifted or caved, that meant the whole thing could collapse at any second. The captain ordered us to mask up and go in slow. We stretched a line through the doorway, careful with our footing. Every step sank into grain dust that puffed up like smoke. The visibility was garbage. Our lights cut maybe a few feet ahead. Halfway in, the rumble grew louder. My chest vibrated with it. It wasn't machinery. It wasn't fire. It was deeper, like the building itself was growling. Then came the crack. A sharp splintering snap beneath us. The floor shifted an inch. Just 1 inch. But enough for all of us to freeze. The captain shouted for us to back out. But before we could, the grain surged. It didn't collapse fast. It moved like a wave. 1 second it was solid ground. The next it was shifting under us, dragging at our boots, pulling like suction. I dropped my nozzle, lunged for the door. Daniels grabbed my arm, yanking me back as a hole opened right where I'd been. A crater, wide and dark, swallowing grain in a whirlpool. The noise was deafening. The building groaned, metal sheets screeching as bolts ripped loose. Smoke and dust filled the air until I couldn't see my own gloves. I heard screaming, not from the farmer, from us. We scrambled toward the doorway, blind, coughing in our masks. The captain's voice cut through, yelling names, but one was missing. Rodriguez. He'd been on the far side of the pile. We couldn't see him. Just muffled shouts, then silence. The captain made the call. We went back in. Against every survival instinct, we waded deeper into that shifting pit. Grain sucked at our legs, dragging us knee-deep, thigh-deep, like it wanted to bury us too. My light caught movement. A glove thrashing above the grain. Rodriguez. We lunged, grabbing his arms, pulling with everything we had. The suction fought us, pulling him down inch by inch. His mask was cracked, dust filling his faceplate. We hauled until my shoulders screamed. Finally, he came free, coughing blood into his regulator. His legs were twisted, crushed by the pressure. But he was alive. For the moment, the captain barked for evac. We turned, dragging Rodriguez between us. That's when the rumble changed. It wasn't steady anymore. It was violent, rhythmic, like pounding from below, and then Silence. For one breathless second, everything stopped. The air was dead still. No hum, no shifting. Just silence so complete it made my ears ring. Then the world gave way. The floor collapsed beneath us. Not a crack this time. A total failure. We fell. All of us. Grain, concrete, steel, everything dropping into a void that shouldn't have been there. I remember weightlessness. The hose whipping past me. The beam of my helmet light spinning in dust and smoke. I hit hard, buried to my chest in grain. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. The weight pressed down, crushing ribs, filling my mask with fine dust. I thought it was the end. Somehow instinct took over. I clawed upward, fighting inch by inch. My arms burned. My lungs screamed. Grain poured over my shoulders, down my collar, into my mouthpiece. Every move felt slower, heavier. But then air. Cold night air on my gloves. I broke the surface, dragging myself onto solid debris. When I looked back, the building was gone. Just a crater, smoking in the moonlight. Grain still shifting like it was alive. And somewhere beneath my brothers, we pulled out who we could. Daniels was crushed by a falling beam. The captain, we never found him. Rodriguez, the one we saved, died in the ambulance before sunrise. The farmer sat on his knees by the crater, rocking back and forth. He kept whispering the same thing. It wasn't the fire. It wasn't the fire. It wanted them. The investigation called it a structural failure. Said moisture weakened the silo base, created a void, made collapse inevitable. Dust ignited, amplifying the disaster, but that doesn't explain the sound. That deep rumble, like something breathing beneath us. All four of us heard it, and three of us are gone. I can still feel it sometimes, in the quiet hours lying awake. That vibration, rolling under my chest, like the earth itself is waiting. Waiting for another collapse, waiting for another life. I want you to imagine the ocean. Not the calm postcard version. Not the beaches tourists flock to. I'm talking about the sea at its worst. Cold, black, relentless. Where the waves slam against the rocks with enough force to break bone. And the wind never stops screaming. That's where this story lives. On a jagged outcrop of stone called the North Barrens. And the lighthouse that guarded it. The North Barrens lighthouse was manned by 3 keepers at the time. Old records list their names, but I'll keep them to myself out of respect. They weren't legends. They weren't characters in some sailor's tale. They were ordinary men doing their job, keeping ships from smashing into the rocks, but the sea doesn't forgive. And sometimes neither does fate. The supply ship reached them once every 2 weeks. It brought food, water, lamp oil, letters from home, but during storms, deliveries could be delayed. Sometimes days, sometimes weeks. The lighthouse was stocked for emergencies, but rationing only stretched so far. One winter, the storms didn't stop. A nor'easter hammered the coast for 12 straight days. The supply boat couldn't risk the crossing. The lighthouse stood alone, battered by wind and rain, its keepers trapped inside. They waited. They rationed. But hunger sets in fast when you're burning calories just to stay warm. One of the men, let's call him the younger keeper, kept a diary. Those pages survived, waterlogged but legible, and they give us a glimpse into what really happened. Day 1 of the storm, spirits high. The men joked about the waves, about how the sea was trying to knock them into the rocks. They still had food, still had whiskey, still had patience. Day 4, meals cut in half. Complaints about the cold, about damp clothes that never dried. Whiskey running low. Day 7, arguments breaking out. The older keeper hoarded biscuits, accused the others of eating more than their share. They turned on him, found his stash, and the trust between them cracked. By day 10, things had turned grim. The diary's handwriting shifts, jagged and frantic. Words repeat, sentences trail off mid-line, and then the entry. The barrel calls. No context. No explanation. Just those words. The lighthouse stored fuel for its great lamp. Kerosene, whale oil in older days, and in this case casks of industrial alcohol, denatured, meant only for burning. It was poison. Everyone knew that. But hunger, thirst, and madness twist a man's judgment. The diary doesn't spell out the first sip, but the next page is smeared, like written with shaking hands. It burns, but it warms. Then, he says one drink makes you strong. Then, we will share. That was the last complete entry. When the supply boat finally braved the waves on day 15, What they found became one of the most disturbing reports in maritime history. The door to the lighthouse stood open, banging in the wind. Inside, the stench was unbearable. Not just rot, not just sickness. Something chemical, acrid, that clung to the walls. 2 of the keepers were dead. Their bodies twisted, their faces locked in contorted masks of agony. Black fluid leaked from their mouths. Their eyes were clouded, ringed with burst blood vessels. The 3rd keeper was alive, barely. They found him slumped in the lantern room, rocking back and forth. His lips were burned raw, his teeth stained black. He clutched a tin cup in one hand, the dregs of poison at the bottom. When they pulled him away, he fought them, screamed, begged them to let him finish his drink. The doctor's notes describe what happened after. Convulsions, vomiting blood, skin blistering from within as though his insides were cooking. He lasted less than a day before death took him too. The coroner wrote, "Cause of death, methanol poisoning. Consumed as substitute for spirits." That was the official story. But there are details in the diary, in the witness accounts. Details that don't line up so neatly, like the scratches carved into the stone walls of the keeper's quarters. Deep grooves made by fingernails. Dozens of them, like the drawings in the margins of the diary, rough sketches of something standing in the waves. A figure with no face, arms stretched wide as if beckoning, and the last phrase scrawled across the final page, "The sea drinks too." Some dismissed it as delirium, hallucinations caused by poison. Others whispered about the old legends of the barons, stories of a presence in the waves, a hunger that demanded its own sacrifices. Whatever the truth, the facts remain. 3 men trapped by storms, 3 men driven to drink poison, 3 men dead. The lighthouse was automated a few years later. No more keepers stationed there. No more diaries to record the madness of isolation. But sailors still say that when storms roll in and the beacon cuts through the black, you can hear something carried on the wind, a voice, low, raspy, whispering from the rocks, "Just one more drink." There are jobs most people never think about. Jobs that happen far below the surface of the ocean, out of sight, out of mind. Saturation diving is one of them. It's dangerous. It's technical. And when something goes wrong, it doesn't just kill. It obliterates. I want you to picture it. A team of divers working hundreds of feet under the sea, repairing oil platforms, welding pipelines, fixing valves no machine can reach. To do this, they live under pressure, literally. They spend days, sometimes weeks, inside pressurized chambers. The air inside matches the crushing weight of the ocean outside. That way they can exit into the deep without their bodies collapsing. But that pressure is a trap. The human body can't return to the surface too quickly. If you rise without careful decompression, nitrogen bubbles form in your blood. It's called the bends, and it can kill you in minutes. So the divers rely on gauges, valves, routines honed to perfection. Because even the smallest mistake in that chamber doesn't just end lives, it tears them apart. This story is about a night when one mistake, one critical error, unleashed a death so fast, so violent, that the official report reads like something out of a horror novel. The incident happened off the coast of Norway in the 1980s. A diving support vessel was stationed near a rig. 4 divers were inside the pressurized living chamber, resting between shifts. 2 more were outside in a transfer capsule, preparing to return inside. The pressure in those chambers was enormous, around 9 atmospheres. That's the equivalent of being 300 feet underwater. Imagine every square inch of your body pressed with hundreds of pounds of force. And the only thing holding it steady? Steel doors, valves, gauges. At 4:00 a.m., one of the divers outside finished his shift. He entered the transfer capsule with a teammate, ready to rejoin the others. The capsule was brought up and locked to the main chamber. Now came the critical step. The pressure had to be equalized before the inner door could be opened. Slowly, carefully, by the book. But that night, something went wrong. One of the tenders operating the system, maybe distracted, maybe tired, opened a valve too quickly. In less than a second, the chamber lost its balance. The pressure inside equalized not over minutes, but instantly. And in that instant, 4 men died in ways too brutal for most people to imagine. The survivor's testimony describes it in fragments. He heard a sound like a shotgun blast, felt the air rip past him, the force so strong it slammed him against the wall. One diver, standing closest to the inner hatch, was sucked forward as the door blew open. His body never made it through. The pressure difference ripped him apart at the torso. His upper half was ejected from the chamber. His lower half stayed inside. Another man was crushed against the steel walls, his bones breaking instantly under the violent decompression. The official autopsy records note details that are hard to speak aloud. Organs forced through openings in the body, lungs exploding, blood boiling into mist. It happened so fast, the survivors barely had time to register it. 1 second they were 6 men. The next, only 2 were left alive. The investigation that followed combed through every gauge, every valve, every logbook. They concluded the cause was operator error. A valve turned too fast. A safety step skipped. A fraction of a second's mistake, but the details leaked. Photographs from the scene circulated quietly among diving crews. Men who saw them spoke of nightmares, of images burned into their minds forever, and one detail never left the official record. The gauges on the chamber were found frozen at the moment of disaster. Needles bent, glass shattered, as if the instruments themselves had been caught mid-scream. The company sealed the reports. They didn't want the public to know how fragile the system was, how one slip could turn men into mist. But among divers, the story spread. They called it the gauge, not just for the dials frozen in place, but for the lesson it carved into their trade. Every diver who heard it knew, the ocean doesn't forgive. Pressure is merciless, and the gauges are the only line between life and the kind of death no one should ever endure. Even today, new divers are shown those reports during training. They're warned, in blunt words, what happens if you grow careless. Some veterans say the chambers themselves feel haunted, that when you sit in the silence you can hear faint pops, like bubbles bursting in your blood, or whispers in the steel. Others refuse to talk about it at all. Because once you've read what happened, once you've seen the photographs, you can never unsee them. The men who died that night were professionals, skilled, experienced. They didn't make the mistake, but they paid the price, and that's the horror of it. Sometimes, no matter how well you know the risks, your life rests on the hands of someone outside the chamber. Someone who just has to turn the valve the right way. 4 divers entered that night, only 2 walked out, and the chamber, cold and silent, held the echoes of the others forever. 3 jobs, 3 men, 3 endings almost too brutal to believe. A firefighter swallowed alive in a collapsing silo. A lighthouse keeper driven to drink poison until death took him screaming. And divers ripped apart by pressure so violent it left their chamber soaked in horror. They weren't stories. They weren't legends. They were real, documented, and final. Every day, people walk into jobs with danger waiting beneath the surface. And sometimes they don't walk out again. You've been watching Haunted Uploads. If these stories kept you on edge, subscribe for more. And remember, these aren't ghost tales. They're warnings, because the next story might be closer than you think.